Alright guys, actually I just wanted to throw a couple quick things. I meant to put this in the last video and then I kind of forgot. So I talked about, we talked about panning or using the hand tool, right? So anytime you pan and you want to recenter the scene or the canvas, there's actually a little option up here that says reset position, and it'll always reset it back to the middle. So that's always helpful, like that. Also, another thing, so it works on the zoom too. There's this rotate tool. So you can see I can actually rotate the canvas as well. Why would you want to do this? Some people might be using a stylus pen to draw into the program, to draw like a character or something like that. So let's say, you might be, sometimes this is easier to rotate the canvas to do some drawing. So you can rotate your canvas as well. Eventually you're going to want it to go back to the default, rotation, so it's pointing upward. To do that, there's a little option that should say right here, reset rotation. I was also talking about being able to reset or move around aspects of your interface. The way you would do that is so I mentioned these are like setups or rooms. I forgot that there's a little lock here. So if you unlock it, so now this is unlocked, you can see this little icon over here. That means now I'm able to actually move these around. So if I click and drag, you can see I can reposition these to different parts. Okay, I actually just kind of like the default, to be perfectly honest. I'm just more familiar with that. So I'm going to go under... If I right click on this, I'm going to say reset room 2D to default layout and hit yes. Are you sure you want to reset room 2D to default? And I'm going to hit yes. And that's kind of, I like it, but if you want to move stuff around, you can. And then if you move it around to where you like and you don't want to accidentally move it, you can always then lock it back up. Okay. I'm going to open up exercise or scene 2. So what I'm going to do is go to File, Load Scene. So once you kind of load the project, it's going to make it easy to load all the scenes in the project. That's kind of why I gave you this project folder. I'm going to go to 2 and hit Load. Okay. This is my canvas here. And what we're going to do is start to draw. Okay. So I'm going to go to the paintbrush tool or the brush tool. Make sure in the timeline at the bottom you are on the drawing level here. And I can start or can I? So I grabbed the brush tool here. Make sure you, in your tool options up here at the top, lock alpha is off. And what I can do is start to draw. So, this is a 2D program, so we're going to be drawing things. Okay. If you don't like what you drew, you can always go to Edit, Undo, and undo the last thing you just did. Or Command Z, or Command or Control Z there. Let's talk about, so right now I have sort of a black pencil. Things I can do up here at the top. This is the size of my brush. Okay, so right now it's set to a minimum of 20 and a maximum of 20. So if I wanted this is the range of the size. So if I make this bigger, so you can see the maximum. Now my lines are a little bit thicker than they were before. Okay. So you can change the thickness of your strokes here. Hardness is how crisp the edges are. So I'm going to make this a little bit bigger. So right now my edges are really crisp. If I turn the hardness down, this would make the brush kind of more like a watercolor brush where there's a softer edge on things. You can see that the edges are a little more blurred here. I'll turn it all the way down to 0. you know, gets a little more blurry there. There's also an opacity. Opacity is how opaque or thick the stroke is. So right now, this is a pure black because that's the color of my stroke. If I lowered this to about 50%, it's kind of like a semi-transparent, kind of like a watercolor. So you can even actually build them up. You can see I'm sort of putting these on top of each other to get a thicker color than what's there. Okay, so it's like, see how I'm sort of building these up a little bit. So you can play around with opacity to kind of create levels of tone. We'll talk a little more about this in a second, or in a future class. For now, I'm just going to set it back to about 100. All right, so let's talk about the style editor. Okay, it looks like this. Okay, this is what we're going to be using to create brushes and colors. So essentially, you know, this class is a lot about, you know, 2D drawing is a lot about, or 2D animation is a lot about drawing. Okay, so if this was like an art class, imagine like I gave you like a pencil, right? Here's the pencil, and you could use this pencil, and as long as everything you're doing is gray, then that's what you can do, right? So then if you wanted colors, I'd have to give you like additional colored pencils, right? Each pencil I give you is a different color, and you can use it to add different colors to the, you know, whatever you're drawing, right? And so in Tahoma2D, there's this term called style, okay? And what a style is, think of it as we're building our own brush that we can work with, okay? So the way that we do that is through the Style Editor palette, which is down there. I'm going to open this back up by going under Panels. Oops. Actually, that would be the palette, technically. I guess I opened up a special one. So this is our palette. These are all the different quote-unquote colors that we have. So usually you start with like one or two. This is a black. This is a blue. So if I use this one, instead of using black ink or black paint, I'm using blue ink, right? And currently that's all I really have. So let's say I wanted to build a new pencil or a new brush. How would I do that? Well, I'd click on this little plus sign here. And you can see I started with 0, now I have 1, 2, and now I have 3. So defaultly, you'll take whatever your last color was and just give you another version of that. I don't really want that, but instead what I'm going to do is go up here, and I'm going to change this to a new color. Okay. So if I set this to say green, for instance, you can see that this has become green. Okay. To understand the colors in our scene, you have to understand how colors work. Okay, so all colors are made up of 3 properties. Those properties are hue, saturation, and what's known as brightness, sometimes referred to as lightness, sometimes referred to as gamma. Okay, hue is your base color. That's your Roy G. Biv, red, orange, yellow, green, blue, indigo, violet. And that is what is represented by this hexagon here. So red, orange, yellow, green, blue, indigo, violet. Okay? It's the color wheel, essentially. So let's say I want to set it to red. Okay? Now, if you know anything about painting a room, you know that there's no such thing as just red. If you go to the Home Depot or whatever, there's many shades of red, right? So we need additional properties to help us understand how to differentiate different shades of red. So the next one is saturation. Saturation is how intense a color is. Okay. What I mean by intensity is, I thought I had an example here, but I don't think I do. But an intense color would be like a neon color, like a really bright neon pink or yellow or something. That would be a very saturated color. The opposite of a saturated color would be a very low saturated color, like a pastel or something very, they don't stand out as much. Saturated colors are very intense. You can't help but look at them or notice them. Low saturated colors deliberately don't stand out. Okay. Finally, the last property is brightness. Sometimes referred to as lightness, sometimes referred to as gamma. It depends who you're talking to. But essentially, what brightness means is how much light is being added to the color. Okay. So, when we see color, like for instance, let's say I want to see the color of this blue Post-it note here. Okay. The way it works is that light from the atmosphere bounces off of the object and comes into our eyes. That's how we as humans perceive color. So how much light is being, bouncing off of the surface of an item is going to affect the color of that item. Okay. Light is, the sun gives off white light. White light is sort of the natural default light. That's why actually, light bulbs and such are painted white to mimic natural light. And so when we say something is bright, what we're really saying is there's a lot of white light being added to it. The opposite of bright, something being bright would be darkness, and darkness is the absence of light. So how do these two properties play into here? So once you choose a hue from your slider here, you get this little triangle, right? So the way that it works is that the lower saturated colors, or the less intense colors, are over here on the right side, and the more intense colors, or the brighter, more saturated colors, over here on the left side. So you can see this is a very saturated red. This is a low saturated red, aka like a pink, okay? In terms of brightness or gamma, it goes from bottom up. So this is pure black. This would be an absence of light, or no light being added to it. This is like a little bit of light. And then as I add more and more light to my color here, you can see the color gets brighter and brighter and brighter. Okay. So you can use these properties to help you choose a color. So I'm going to make a new color that I want to work with. And by the way, here, I'm just going to use that sort of pinkish color. Okay. Let's say I want to make a new color. I want to make a yellow. So I'm going to click. That's going to make it, it's going to be based off my old color. And I'm just going to, let's say I want to choose yellow as my hue. I want it to be a very saturated yellow. So I want something that's kind of like in this side of the triangle here on the left side. And I want it very bright, so it's going to be near the top of the triangle. So this would be a very saturated yellow, kind of like, something you might see in like a traffic sign or like a tennis ball or something like that. Okay. So you can start building your own colors. By default, it's going to kind of look like little paint swatches, little color things like here. You can change the way it looks by clicking on this lower right-hand corner here. So this is small thumbnails. You could have it as larger thumbnails. You could have it as even larger, or you could just have it as lists if you want to do that. By default, it's just going to give it a name like, color 1, color 2, color 3, color 4. If you want, you can even name these. Like, let's say you want to use this as like, maybe I'm going to have 2 yellows. One's going to be called bright yellow. So I'm just clicking return and giving this a name. If you're in list mode, instead of the plus sign is here. And I'll have a lower color yellow. So this will be like less saturated yellow, or I'll call it dim yellow. All right. Try that out. Try building a few of your own colors. Play around with different hues, saturations, intensities. Try seeing which thumbnails work. What does it look best for you? Some people like thumbnails. Some people just like a list view. I prefer list view myself just because I like to name things, but it's up to you really. Also, one other thing I forgot to mention, I'm going to choose yellow for instance. In addition to setting the hue, saturation, and brightness, we can also technically set the opacity, or how heavy the stroke is, or how thick the color is by default. This would be referred to as alpha. How opaque is the color? So I can defaultly make my yellow defaultly semi-transparent. The way I would do that is in your, make sure you're on the color tab here. Right below it, there should be a tab that says A for alpha. And you'll notice there's a little slider here. So all the way to the right, it goes 0 to 255. 255 is pure opaqueness, meaning it's a solid color. If you set it to, say, the middle of the slider, that would be like, 150, 125-ish. It's going to be semi-transparent. The lower I set this, the more it kind of, oops. You can see here, it's like, each stroke is like barely kind of applying it. Let me set it up a little higher. Okay. So try that out. That was just creating your own brushes using the brush tool, making your own colors, and making your own styles that you can use. By the way, if you can't find that opacity, you click here and make sure. So this is the wheel. The wheel is the color wheel, and this is the alpha. This is a hexadecimal value too, by the way, for those of you who know what hexadecimal values are. That's a way to pinpoint a specific color. So if you're someone who's done this with web development or computer programming, that's another way to choose a color if you want to get the exact value of that color.